The hallways of Beaconville High School bustled with the usual Monday morning chaos. Lockers slammed, friends caught up on weekend stories, and teachers hurried to their classrooms with coffee cups in hand. Amid all this noise and movement, 16-year-old Asim Khalid walked quietly, his eyes fixed on the floor tiles as he counted his steps to math class. Asim was the kind of student most people didn't notice. He wasn't part of any sports teams or clubs. He didn't raise his hand in class discussions. He sat in the back corner of every classroom, wore the same 3 hoodies in rotation, and spoke so softly that teachers often had to ask him to repeat himself on the rare occasions he spoke at all. "Hey, watch it," someone called as Asim accidentally bumped into them. He mumbled a quick sorry and hurried on, clutching his worn blue notebook closer to his chest. That notebook went everywhere with Asim. Its pages were filled with numbers, equations, and strange symbols that made sense only to him. Inside Mr. Patel's advanced mathematics classroom, students were already settling into their usual spots. The popular kids claimed the middle rows, sports players lounged in the back, and the usual hand-raisers perched eagerly in the front. Asim slipped into his corner seat by the window where a patch of sunlight warmed his desk. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Patel said, his voice carrying across the room. He was a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Unlike most teachers who had given up on getting Asim to participate, Mr. Patel still tried. "Today we'll continue with our unit on differential equations. But first I'd like to return your tests from last week." As Mr. Patel moved between the desks handing back papers, the usual mix of groans and cheers filled the room. "Nice job. Zoe, 87. Leo, you're improving. See me after class about question 5. When he reached Asim's desk, Mr. Patel paused longer than with other students. He placed the paper face down and said quietly, "I'd like to talk to you about your approach to problem 3 when you have a moment." Asim nodded without making eye contact, his stomach tightening with anxiety. Had he gotten it wrong? After Mr. Patel moved on, he flipped the paper over. At the top, in red ink, was a perfect score of 100%. But next to problem 3, Mr. Patel had written, "See me." "Interesting method. How did you think of this?" Asim relaxed slightly. He wasn't in trouble. Mr. Patel had just noticed something different about his solution. This happened sometimes. While other students followed the methods taught in class, Asim often saw different pathways through problems. Numbers and patterns connected in his mind in ways that were hard to explain. Sometimes he got things wrong because he didn't follow instructions, but more often, he found shortcuts or elegant solutions that weren't in the textbook. As the lesson began, Asim half listened while opening his notebook to a blank page. Mr. Patel was explaining how differential equations could model real-world situations like population growth and decay. "When we apply these equations to real problems," Mr. Patel said, writing on the board, "we can predict future outcomes based on current conditions." While most students hurried to copy the equations from the board, Asim's pencil moved in a different rhythm. In the margins of his notes, he sketched variations of the equations, testing what would happen if variables were changed or if different constraints were added. "Asim," Mr. Patel's voice broke through his concentration. "Could you share your thoughts on this problem?" The room fell silent. 26 pairs of eyes turned toward Asim, who felt his face grow hot. He stammered, looking down at his notebook. Mr. Patel smiled patiently. "Take your time." Asim took a deep breath. "The equation works for steady growth, but real populations don't grow steadily. They have, limits and sudden changes." His voice was barely audible. "Exactly right," Mr. Patel nodded, "which is why we need to consider carrying capacity in our models." "Thank you, Asim." A few students looked surprised that the quiet kid had actually said something smart. Most quickly lost interest and turned back to their notes. But Deepti Chen, who sat 2 rows over, gave Asim a small smile. He quickly looked away, but something warm flickered in his chest. When the bell rang, students rushed out as if escaping prison. Asim packed up slowly, hoping to avoid the crush in the hallway. He was about to slip out when Mr. Patel called him back. "Asim, do you have a minute to discuss your test?" Reluctantly, Asim approached the teacher's desk. "I've been teaching advanced math for 15 years, Mr. Patel said, pulling out Asim's test paper, "and I've never seen someone solve this particular problem using this method." Pointed to problem 3. The problem had asked students to find the Maximum value of a function with multiple variables and constraints. Most students had used the method from the textbook, involving partial derivatives. Asim had drawn a different approach using a geometric visualization that reduced the steps by half. "How did you come up with this?" Mr. Patel asked. Asim shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "It just made more sense to me this way. I saw that the function could be viewed as a three-dimensional shape, and then the answer is just the highest point on that shape." Mr. Patel studied Asim with newfound interest. "That's graduate-level thinking, Asim. Have you been studying advanced mathematics outside of class?" Asim shrugged. "I watch some videos online sometimes, and I try things out in my notebook." "Well, you have a remarkable talent," Mr. Patel said. "Have you thought about joining the math team? Or perhaps taking some college courses next year?" The thought of being on a team, of having to talk to strangers and explain his thinking out loud, made Asim's hands sweat. "I don't think I'd be good at that," he mumbled. Mr. Patel didn't push it. "Well, if you ever change your mind, let me know. And Asim, it's okay to share your ideas in class more often. Your perspective is valuable." Asim nodded and escaped into the hallway, relieved the conversation was over, but also feeling something unusual, a small glow of pride. At lunch, while most students gathered in noisy groups, Asim found a quiet corner of the library. He unwrapped his sandwich with one hand while opening his notebook with the other. The conversation with Mr. Patel had started something turning in his mind. If his way of seeing math problems was unusual, what else might he be able to solve? He flipped to a section in his notebook where he'd been working on a pattern he'd noticed in prime numbers. No one had assigned this work. It was just something that interested him. He'd been trying to find a better way to predict the distribution of primes in large number sets. "Is this seat taken?" Asim looked up, startled to see Deepti standing by his table. She was holding a lunch tray and smiling uncertainly. "No," he said, quickly moving his backpack to make room. "Thanks." She sat down. "The cafeteria is too loud. I can't hear myself think." Asim nodded, not sure what to say next. He rarely had conversations with classmates. Deepti glanced at his notebook. "Are those prime numbers? Are you doing extra credit or something?" "No, just thinking about something. Cool." She didn't push for more explanation, which Asim appreciated. Instead, she pulled out a book and began reading while she ate. They sat in comfortable silence for the rest of the lunch period. As strange as it was to have company, Asim found he didn't mind Deepti's presence. There was something calming about her. When the bell rang, she gathered her things and said, "Same time tomorrow?" Surprised, Asim nodded. For the rest of the day, Asim moved through his classes in a fog, his mind still working on his prime number pattern. In English, while they discussed symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird, Asim was mentally testing a new formula. During history, as Mr. Griggs lectured about World War II, Asim sketched equations in the margins of his notes. At home that evening, Asim sat at his small desk in the corner of his bedroom. The walls were bare except for a single poster showing the mathematical constant pi, calculated to thousands of decimal places. His bookshelf held an odd mix of science fiction novels and advanced mathematics textbooks that he'd found at library book sales. "Asim, dinner's ready," his mother called from downstairs. "Coming," he replied, reluctantly setting aside his notebook. At the dinner table, his parents exchanged stories about their day. His father taught physics at the community college and his mother worked as a librarian. They were both quiet people who understood Asim's need for space and never pushed him to be more outgoing. "How was school today?" his father asked. Usually, Asim would respond with fine or okay. But tonight he said, "Mr. Patel liked my solution to a math problem. He said it was graduate-level thinking." His parents exchanged surprised looks. It wasn't like Asim to volunteer information about school. "That's wonderful," his mother said warmly. "Mr. Patel is a good teacher. He sees how special you are." Asim looked down at his plate, embarrassed but pleased. "Did you show him your work on those equations you were telling me about last weekend?" his father asked. Asim shook his head. "No, those aren't for school." His father nodded, understanding. Some math was just for Asim, a private language he used to make sense of the world. After dinner, Asim returned to his room and his notebook. Outside his window, the sky darkened and stars appeared one by one. Asim worked late into the night, losing track of time as numbers and patterns flowed through his mind. He didn't know it yet, but in just a few days everything would change. The quiet kid who no one noticed would face a challenge that would push him far outside his comfort zone. A mathematical problem that had stumped experts and machines alike. And somehow, in the strange, beautiful landscape of numbers that existed in Asim's mind, he would find a path no one else could see. The announcement came on a Wednesday morning, when the sky outside the classroom windows was the color of pencil lead. Rain tapped against the glass, creating a gentle backdrop to Mr. Patel's excited voice. "I have something special to share today," he said, standing at the front of the math class with unusual energy. "Beaconville High has been selected for an extraordinary opportunity." The sleepy murmurs of the classroom quieted as students looked up from their phones and notebooks. Greenfield University's Department of Mathematics has chosen our school for their annual high school mathematics challenge. Only 3 schools in the state were selected. This caught everyone's attention. Greenfield was one of the top-ranked universities in the country, known especially for its mathematics and computer science programs. Their research team will visit next Monday to present a special mathematics problem to our advanced classes. This problem is what they call an open question, meaning that currently there is no complete solution. Whispers spread across the room. Deepti, who had become a regular at Asim's lunch table over the past week, raised her hand. "Will they expect us to solve it?" Mr. Patel smiled. "No, not exactly. The purpose isn't for high school students to solve an unsolved problem. It's to introduce you to the world of mathematical research and show you what real mathematicians work on. Think of it as inspiration rather than a test." From his corner seat, Asim listened with growing interest. Open problems were the gold at the end of the rainbow in mathematics, questions that had resisted the best efforts of the brightest minds. He'd read about famous ones like the Riemann hypothesis and the Collatz conjecture, but he'd never encountered one directly. The university researchers will explain the problem, show how they've approached it so far, and discuss its implications, Mr. Patel continued. Then they'll leave it with us for a week. You're encouraged to think about it, discuss it, and try different approaches. When they return the following week, they'll share any progress their team has made. Leo, a confident student who always had something to say, spoke up without raising his hand. "Is this problem like impossible to solve? Or has nobody just figured it out yet?" It was a good question. Asim leaned forward slightly to hear the answer. "That's the beauty of mathematics, Leo," Mr. Patel replied. "We never truly know if a problem is impossible or just waiting for the right insight. This particular problem has been worked on by top mathematicians for about 3 years. It has practical applications in computing, which is why there's significant interest in solving it." Another student called out, "If professional mathematicians can't solve it, what's the point of showing it to us?" "Fresh eyes sometimes see things that experts miss," Mr. Patel said. "But more importantly, this is a chance for you to experience the frontier of mathematical research. In your textbooks, you only see finished mathematics, problems with known solutions. This is a glimpse of the unknown." Asim felt a spark of excitement. The unknown, a problem without a solution in the back of the book. His fingers itched to open his notebook. "One more thing," Mr. Patel added. "The university team has even run this problem through the latest AI systems, which can only provide approximate solutions. It seems this particular question has elements that current machine learning approaches struggle with." This final detail made Asim sit up straighter. A problem that even computers couldn't crack? Now that was interesting. For the rest of the period, Mr. Patel returned to their regular lesson, but Asim found it hard to focus. His mind kept circling back to the upcoming challenge. What kind of problem could stump both human experts and advanced AI? At lunch, Asim and Deepti sat at their usual table in the library corner. What had started as a chance encounter had somehow become a comfortable routine. They didn't always talk. Often they just read or worked side by side, but today Deepti wanted to discuss the morning's news. "What do you think the problem will be?" she asked, unwrapping her sandwich. Asim shrugged. "Probably something with computation complexity. Those are the hardest for computers." "You seem to know a lot about this stuff," Deepti observed, not for the first time. "Outside of class, I mean." Asim picked at the edge of his notebook. "I read about it sometimes. Are you going to try to solve it?" "The university problem?" The question made Asim uncomfortable. Of course he would try. He couldn't help himself when faced with an interesting math puzzle. But the idea of sharing his attempts, of having others judge his work, made his palms sweat. "Maybe," he said non-committally. Probably not. Deepy seemed to sense his discomfort and changed the subject. Did you finish the physics lab report? I'm stuck on the error analysis section. Asim relaxed as they moved to safer territory. The days leading up to Monday dragged like feet through mud. Over the weekend, Asim found himself distracted during family dinner and his usual Saturday morning bike ride. His mind kept wandering to the mysterious problem, imagining what it might be. When Monday finally arrived, the atmosphere in the advanced math class was charged with excitement. Extra chairs had been brought in for students from other math sections. Even a few science teachers had shown up to witness the presentation. At precisely 10 a.m., Mr. Patel welcomed 3 visitors from Greenfield University: Dr. Haruki Yamada, a professor with silver-streaked hair and round glasses; Dr. Elena Kostova, a younger researcher with quick movements and bright eyes; and Wei-Chen, a graduate student who looked barely older than the high school seniors. "We're delighted to be here," Dr. Yamada began, his voice carrying a soft accent. "Mathematics is often taught as a settled subject, with all answers known. But the most beautiful mathematics happens at the edges of what we understand." He gestured to his colleagues who were setting up a projector. "Today we'll share a problem from our current research. It involves optimization in multidimensional spaces, with applications in quantum computing." A collective groan rose from some students. Quantum computing sounded complicated, but Asim felt his heartbeat quicken. He'd been reading about quantum algorithms online, fascinated by how they differed from classical approaches. Dr. Kostova took over, clicking to the first slide. "Don't worry, we'll break this down step by step," she assured them with a smile. No knowledge of quantum mechanics required. Over the next 40 minutes, the researchers explained their problem. It involved finding the most efficient path through a complex network with changing conditions, something called a dynamic optimization problem. They showed visualizations, simplified examples, and explained why traditional algorithms struggled with it. "This may sound abstract," Dr. Chen said, "but imagine planning a delivery route through a city where the traffic patterns are constantly changing in unpredictable ways. Now multiply that complexity by thousands of dimensions and you'll get a sense of the challenge." As the presentation continued, many students' eyes glazed over. The researchers used terms like non-convex optimization and combinatorial explosion that weren't part of the high school curriculum. But Asim was completely absorbed, filling page after page of his notebook with notes and questions. The researchers explained that the problem had implications for designing quantum computer algorithms, making supply chains more efficient, and even helping understand how proteins fold. A critical question in biology and medicine. "We've tried various approaches," Dr. Yamada said. Showing a slide of unsuccessful methods, classical optimization fails because of the dimensionality. Machine learning approaches can approximate solutions but miss critical structures. Even our most advanced AI systems struggle because this problem requires both computational power and a kind of mathematical intuition. Dr. Kostova took over again. "What makes this particularly interesting is that we believe a complete solution exists. It's not like some mathematical problems that can be proven unsolvable. It's just extraordinarily difficult to find." As they wrapped up, they displayed the formal mathematical statement of the problem on the screen. A dense paragraph of symbols and conditions that filled half the slide. "We'll leave this with you to think about," Dr. Yamada said. "Mr. Patel has printed copies for anyone interested. We don't expect solutions, but we welcome your thoughts and questions when we return next week." The bell rang, signaling the end of the period. As students gathered their things, the visitors were surrounded by a small group of eager questioners. Most students, though, filed out with expressions of relief that the dense presentation was over. Mr. Patel handed out the printed problem statements near the door. Asim took one, carefully folding it and placing it in his notebook. He had a strange feeling about this problem, a sort of mathematical déjà vu. Something about its structure reminded him of patterns he'd explored in his own time. Throughout his remaining classes, Asim couldn't focus. The quantum optimization problem kept pulling at his thoughts like a persistent melody. By the time the final bell rang, he was eager to get home and spread out his notes. In his bedroom, Asim pinned the problem statement to his wall and stepped back to study it. The formal mathematical notation was intimidating, but he started breaking it down piece by piece, translating it into his own mathematical language in his notebook. Hours passed. The sun set, casting his room in shadow until he finally noticed and turned on his desk lamp. His mother called him for dinner, but he asked if he could eat later. This was too important to interrupt. As the night deepened, Asim began to see connections. The quantum optimization problem had similarities to the work he'd been doing with prime number distributions, not in content, but in structure. Both involved finding patterns in apparently chaotic systems. Both required thinking about multiple dimensions simultaneously. Around midnight, Asim's father knocked gently on his door. "You should get some sleep, son," he said, concerned by the intensity in Asim's eyes. "Whatever you're working on will still be there tomorrow." Asim nodded absently. Just a few more minutes. But sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. He'd stumbled onto an approach that the researchers hadn't mentioned, a way of transforming the problem that might simplify its structure. It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was a path worth exploring. When he finally did go to bed well past 2 a.m., the problem followed him into his dreams, shapes and numbers dancing behind his closed eyelids. The next morning at school, Asim was exhausted but buzzing with energy. During chemistry, he nearly knocked over a beaker because his mind was elsewhere. In English, his teacher had to call his name 3 times before he heard her. At lunch, Deepti noticed his distraction immediately. "You're trying to solve it, aren't you?" she asked, studying his face. "The quantum problem." Asim hesitated, then nodded. There was no point denying it. "Did you make any progress?" Her voice held no judgment, just curiosity. "Maybe," he admitted. "I found a different way to look at part of it. Can I see?" The question made him tense up. His notebook was private, a space where his mind could wander freely without fear of criticism. Seeing his hesitation, Deepti quickly added, "It's okay if not." "I was just interested." After a moment's thought, Asim carefully opened his notebook to a page of diagrams and equations. He turned it so Deepti could see but kept his hand on the edge, ready to close it if necessary. Deepti studied the page, her forehead creasing with concentration. "I don't understand all of this," she said finally, "but it looks different from what the researchers showed us." "Your approach seems more geometric." Asim nodded, surprised by her insight. "I think the problem can be mapped to a geometric space where the solution might be easier to find." "Have you shown Mr. Patel?" Asim shook his head quickly. "No, it's probably wrong anyway." "But what if it's not?" Deepti pushed. "What if you're onto something?" The thought made Asim's stomach twist with anxiety. If he showed his work to others and it was wrong, they'd think he was foolish for believing he could solve a problem that stumped experts. "But if he was right, I need more time," he said finally. "It's not ready yet." Deepti nodded, understanding. "Well, I think it's cool that you're even trying. Most people just said the problem was impossible and forgot about it." For the rest of the week, Asim lived and breathed the quantum optimization problem. He worked on it during classes, at lunch, at home until late into the night. He filled dozens of pages in his notebook, pursuing his geometric approach deeper and deeper. By Sunday evening, he'd reached a critical point. His transformation of the problem had led to a simplified version that still captured all the essential complexity. And in this new form, he could see a potential solution path, a way of finding the optimal route through the shifting network that neither human researchers nor AI had discovered. Sitting back in his chair, Asim felt a mix of excitement and disbelief. Could he, a 16-year-old who barely spoke in class, have found what teams of researchers with advanced degrees and cutting-edge computers had missed? It seemed impossible. And yet the math checked out. Each step followed logically from the previous one. He stayed up past midnight, checking and rechecking his work. The more he verified, the more convinced he became. His approach worked, at least on paper. As he finally prepared for bed, a new anxiety took hold. Tomorrow, the researchers would return to discuss the problem. Should he share his solution? The thought of standing up in front of everyone, of explaining his thinking while all eyes were on him, made his heart race with fear. Maybe he could just pass a note to Mr. Patel after class, or email the researchers later. But deep down, Asim knew that if his solution was correct, truly correct, then he had a responsibility to share it. This wasn't just a homework problem. It had real-world applications. It might help advance quantum computing, improve supply chains, or assist in understanding protein folding. As he drifted off to sleep, Asim made no decision. Tomorrow would come, and with it the moment of truth. The quiet kid with the blue notebook would have to decide: stay silent, or speak up and share what might be an impossible breakthrough. That evening, after a dinner he barely tasted, Asim retreated to his bedroom and closed the door. Outside, the wind pushed dark clouds across the moon, sending shadows dancing across his walls. The house creaked and settled around him as his parents watched TV downstairs, their muffled laughter occasionally drifting up through the floorboards. Asim sat cross-legged on his bed, the quantum optimization problem spread out before him, the official printout from the university researchers, now dog-eared and marked with his notes alongside his open notebook. He'd been staring at the problem for days, approaching it from every angle he could think of, but something still wasn't clicking. The researchers had explained that current approaches hit a wall because of the problem's combinatorial explosion. As the number of variables increased, the possible solutions multiplied beyond what even the fastest computers could check. AI systems could find approximate answers but missed the optimal solution because they couldn't recognize certain patterns in the chaos. Asim rubbed his tired eyes. It was already past 10 and he had school tomorrow. He should sleep, but his mind wouldn't let go of the problem. It felt like standing at the edge of a dark forest, knowing there was a path through but unable to see it. He picked up his blue mechanical pencil and began writing again. Not equations this time, but words. What makes this problem hard for computers? They can't see the whole space at once. They check paths one by one or use patterns they've seen before. But this space is too big to check everything, and the patterns are hidden. Writing helped him think. He continued, "What can humans do that computers can't? Make intuitive leaps. Connect seemingly unrelated ideas. See the forest, not just the trees." He paused, tapping his pencil against the paper. That last line struck a chord. The problem involved optimizing paths through a network with constantly changing conditions. The researchers and their AI systems were focusing on the individual paths, the trees, but maybe the solution lay in understanding the entire forest at once. Asim flipped to a clean page and began drawing a new diagram, not of the network itself, but of the space of all possible states the network could take. If he could somehow map that entire space. His phone buzzed with a text message, breaking his concentration. It was from Deepti. "Still working on the quantum problem? Or did you give up like the rest of us mortals?" Asim smiled slightly. Over the past weeks, Deepti had become the closest thing he had to a friend. Their quiet lunches in the library had evolved to include occasional texts about homework or shared jokes from class. He typed back, "Still working. Can't sleep until I figure it out." Her reply came quickly. "You're either a genius or crazy. Maybe both?" "Probably just stubborn," he responded, then set his phone aside and returned to his diagram. As the night deepened, Asim's parents came upstairs to bed. His father peeked in, reminding him not to stay up too late. Asim nodded absently, barely looking up from his work. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window in its frame. Rain began to fall, first a gentle patter, then a steady drumming against the glass. The sound created a rhythm that matched the flow of Asim's thoughts as he worked. Around midnight, he hit another wall. His new approach seemed promising, but there was a gap in his reasoning that he couldn't bridge. Frustrated, he stood up and stretched, his back cracking after hours hunched over his notebook. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain-slick street, the yellow glow of street lamps reflected in puddles. The world was quiet at this hour, most people long asleep. But Asim's mind was wide awake, buzzing with numbers and patterns. Returning to his bed, he gathered his scattered papers and tried to organize them. Maybe if he started fresh, rethought the problem from the beginning. Then his eye caught something he'd written days ago. A small note in the margin of the university's problem statement. Similar to the prime distribution pattern. Asim blinked, suddenly alert. Early in the week, he'd noticed a structural similarity between the quantum optimization problem and the work he'd been doing on prime number distributions. But he'd set that thought aside to pursue other approaches. Now, with fresh eyes, he returned to it. The connection wasn't obvious. Prime numbers and quantum computing networks seemed worlds apart. But at a deeper level, both involved finding order in apparent randomness, patterns hidden in complexity. With renewed energy, Asim flipped back through his notebook until he found his work on prime distributions. He'd been exploring a geometric approach, mapping primes to points in a multi-dimensional space where certain patterns became visible. Could the same approach work for the quantum optimization problem? Instead of treating the network as a graph with nodes and edges, what if he mapped it to a geometric space where the optimal path would appear as a natural feature, like water flowing downhill? His heart beating faster, Asim began working out the mathematics. He had to transform the network problem into a geometric one, finding the right mapping that preserved all the essential properties. The clock on his nightstand ticked past 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. The house had fallen completely silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the steady rain outside. Asim's desk lamp cast a small circle of light in the darkness as he filled page after page with calculations. At 2:43 a.m., something shifted in his understanding. The transformation he'd been struggling with suddenly clicked into place. It was like putting on glasses after squinting at a blurry world. Everything snapped into focus. The quantum network could indeed be mapped to a geometric space, but not a simple three-dimensional one. It required a higher dimensional manifold with special properties. Within this space, the optimal path appeared as a geodesic, the equivalent of a straight line on a curved surface. Finding this geodesic was still challenging, but Asim realized he could adapt an algorithm he'd read about in an online mathematics forum, one designed for finding shortest paths in curved spaces. With some modifications, his pencil flew across the paper as he worked out the details. By 3:30 a.m., he had a complete outline of a solution approach. By 4:15 a.m., he'd verified it against simplified versions of the problem. It worked, at least in theory. His approach could find the optimal path through the quantum network, without checking every possibility, and without relying on pattern recognition that might miss the true optimal solution. As dawn approached, the rain stopped and the first birds began to sing outside. Asim sat back, his eyes burning with fatigue but his mind crystal clear. He'd done it. He'd found a way to solve the problem that had stumped professional researchers and advanced AI systems. But doubt still lingered at the edges of his certainty. He was just a high school student. His knowledge of advanced mathematics came from library books and online articles, not years of formal education. What if he'd made a fundamental mistake? What if his approach only worked for the simplified cases he'd tested? The numbers and equations on the pages before him seemed to swim as exhaustion finally caught up with him. He needed sleep. With careful movements, he gathered his work and placed it in his notebook, then set his alarm. As he drifted off to sleep, the elegant mathematics of his solution played across his mind like music, beautiful in its simplicity despite the complex problem it addressed. 3 hours later, his alarm jarred him awake. Asim blinked in the morning light, momentarily disoriented. The events of the night came back to him gradually. The breakthrough, the solution, the verification. He picked up his notebook and flipped through the pages he'd filled during the night. Had he really solved it? Or was it just a dream, an illusion born of exhaustion and wishful thinking? No, the mathematics was still there, solid and logical. Each step followed from the previous one. The approach was unconventional, drawing connections between seemingly unrelated fields, but the reasoning was sound. As he prepared for school, Asim's mind raced ahead to the day's challenge. The researchers from Greenfield University would be returning to discuss the problem. Should he share his solution? The thought of standing up and presenting his work made his stomach twist with anxiety. Maybe he could just write it up and give it to Mr. Patel privately, or email it to the university team after they left. At breakfast, his parents noticed his unusual quietness. "Everything okay, Asim?" his mother asked, passing him a plate of toast. "You look tired." "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. His father looked up from his coffee. "Still working on that math problem? Don't push yourself too hard. It's not an exam, just an exercise." Asim nodded, not knowing how to explain that it had become much more than an exercise to him. It had become a quest, a puzzle he needed to solve not for a grade or recognition, but for the pure satisfaction of finding the answer. At school, Asim moved through his morning classes in a fog of fatigue and anticipation. The Greenfield researchers would be presenting during fourth period after lunch. He had until then to decide what to do about his solution. In chemistry, he nearly mixed the wrong chemicals, his mind elsewhere. In English, he stared at the same page for 10 minutes without reading a word. At lunch, Deepti immediately noticed something was different. "Whoa, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said as they sat at their usual table, "or like you haven't slept in a week." "I was up late," Asim said, picking at his sandwich without appetite. Deepti leaned forward, lowering her voice even though no one was nearby. "Did you solve it? The quantum problem?" Asim hesitated, then nodded slightly. Her eyes widened. "Seriously? You actually solved it? Like for real?" "I think so," he said quietly. "I found a different approach. It works on the test cases I tried." "That's amazing." Deepti's excitement was genuine. "Are you going to tell the researchers today?" The question brought his anxiety rushing back. "I don't know, maybe. You have to. This is huge, Asim. If you actually solved a problem that professional mathematicians and AI couldn't crack, but what if I'm wrong?" He interrupted, voicing his deepest fear. "What if I made a mistake or misunderstood the problem? They'll think I'm stupid for even trying." Deepti's expression softened. "First, you're literally the smartest person I know, so no one's going to think you're stupid. Second, even if your solution isn't perfect, they'll be interested in your approach. That's the whole point of this exercise, to think about the problem differently." Asim still looked unconvinced. "Look," Deepti continued, "you don't have to stand up and present it to everyone. Just show Mr. Patel after class or give your notes to Dr. Yamada directly. But don't keep it to yourself." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As they gathered their things, Deepti added, "Whatever you decide, I think what you did is incredible. Even trying to solve this problem took more courage than most of us had." Her words stayed with Asim as he walked to his next class. Courage. He'd never thought of his late-night mathematics as requiring courage. It was just something he did, as natural to him as breathing. The real courage would be sharing it with others. By the time fourth period arrived, Asim still hadn't decided what to do. He took his usual seat in the corner as the classroom filled with students. The Greenfield researchers arrived right after the bell, setting up their presentation at the front. Dr. Yamada began by thanking everyone for their attention the previous week and expressing hope that they had found the problem stimulating, even if intimidating. "Today," he said, "we'd like to discuss some approaches to the problem and why they do or don't work. Then we'll share our team's latest progress." As the presentation continued, Asim's heart pounded in his chest. The researchers discussed several standard approaches and their limitations, all things Asim had already considered and moved past in his own work. They showed visualizations of approximate solutions found by their AI systems, explaining why they believed these weren't optimal. Then Dr. Kostova took over to discuss their latest progress. "We've recently been exploring a new direction," she said, bringing up a slide that made Asim sit up straighter. The approach she described had elements similar to his own, a transformation of the problem into a different mathematical space. But their version was more limited, still treating the network as a graph rather than mapping it to a continuous geometric space. They were so close to his insight, yet still missing the key connection. As she concluded, Dr. Kostova smiled at the class. "We hope this gives you a sense of how mathematical research works. Progress often comes in small steps, with many dead ends along the way. The journey is as important as the destination." Dr. Yamada stepped forward again. "Before we conclude, we'd like to hear from you. Did anyone have thoughts or questions about the problem that they'd like to share?" The room was quiet. Most students had given the problem a cursory look at best, quickly concluding it was beyond their abilities. Mr. Patel broke the silence. "Perhaps someone would like to share their approach even if it didn't lead to a solution. The process is valuable too." More silence. Asim felt as if he were sinking into his chair, his notebook clutched tightly in his hands. This was his moment to speak up, but his throat felt closed, his limbs frozen. Dr. Yamada was about to move on when Deepti raised her hand. "Yes?" Dr. Yamada nodded to her. "I didn't work on this myself," Deepti said clearly. "But I know someone who did, someone who might have found a solution." All eyes turned to follow her gaze, directly to Asim's corner. Asim felt the blood drain from his face. He couldn't believe Deepti had put him on the spot like this. But as their eyes met across the classroom, he saw encouragement in her expression, a silent message. "You can do this." Mr. Patel looked surprised but pleased. "Asim, would you like to share your thoughts?" The room waited. Asim looked down at his notebook, then back up at the expectant faces of the researchers. They didn't look judgmental or skeptical, just curious, interested. Taking a deep breath, Asim stood up, his legs shaky. With his notebook clutched like a shield, he made his way to the front of the classroom. He began, his voice barely audible. He cleared his throat and tried again. I tried a different approach to the problem. As the researchers encouraged him to continue, Asim slowly found his voice. The mathematics that had flowed so naturally in the privacy of his room now came haltingly, but it came. He explained his transformation of the network problem into a geometric one, his adaptation of geodesic algorithms, the connection to his work on prime number distributions. As he spoke, the researcher's expressions changed from polite interest to intense focus. Dr. Kostova began taking rapid notes. Dr. Yamada interrupted occasionally with clarifying questions that Asim answered with growing confidence. When he finished explaining his approach, the classroom was completely silent. Then Dr. Yamada asked, "May I see your work, please?" Asim handed over his notebook open to the key pages. The researchers huddled around it, speaking in low, urgent tones. Words like unprecedented and revolutionary approach drifted back to where Asim stood, his heart pounding in his ears. Finally, Dr. Yamada looked up, his expression a mix of disbelief and excitement. "This is remarkable. We need to test this approach rigorously, of course, but at first glance, it appears you may have found a viable solution path that we completely overlooked." Dr. Kostova was still studying the notebook. "The connection to prime number theory is particularly inspired. It's an approach no one on our team considered." Wei Chen, the graduate student, looked up from the notebook with a grin. The AI systems definitely didn't try this. They wouldn't make this kind of cross-disciplinary leap. The classroom burst into excited chatter. Students who had barely noticed Asim before were now staring at him with newfound respect. Mr. Patel looked both proud and stunned. "Asim," Dr. Yamada said, his voice cutting through the noise, "with your permission, we'd like to take a copy of your work back to the university for further analysis. If your approach proves successful, it would be a significant contribution to the field." Asim nodded, still processing what was happening. As the bell rang and students began filing out, many clapped Asim on the shoulder or gave him thumbs up as they passed. The quiet kid had suddenly become the center of attention, a role that still made him deeply uncomfortable despite the positive nature of it. Deepti waited by the door, a huge smile on her face. As Asim approached, she whispered, "I told you it was amazing." "I can't believe you did that," he whispered back, but there was no anger in his voice, just lingering disbelief at how the day had unfolded. "Someone had to," she replied simply. As they walked out together, the Greenfield researchers were still examining Asim's notebook, talking excitedly about testing his approach on their full data set. Mr. Patel caught up with Asim in the hallway, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I always knew you had extraordinary talent," he said quietly, "but what you showed today went beyond talent. It was brilliance. I'm very proud of you." Asim felt his face flush with embarrassment, but also with a new feeling he wasn't used to: pride. He had done something remarkable. He had found a path that others had missed. The quiet kid with the blue notebook had spoken up, and the world had listened. The days that followed blurred together for Asim. Word of what had happened in Mr. Patel's classroom spread through Beaconville High like wildfire. Students who had never spoken to him before suddenly wanted to sit nearby at lunch. Teachers he'd never had classes with stopped him in the hallway to congratulate him. Even the principal called him to her office to express how proud the school was of his achievement. All this attention was Asim's worst nightmare. He began taking different routes between classes to avoid the main hallways. He started eating lunch outside, finding a quiet spot behind the science building where he could be alone with his thoughts. When people approached him with questions or praise, he mumbled brief responses and quickly escaped. Deepti was the only person whose company he didn't mind. She never pushed him to talk about the quantum problem unless he brought it up first, and she created a buffer between him and curious students who wanted details. "You don't have to hide from everyone," she told him, as they sat together behind the science building on Thursday. The autumn air was crisp and yellow leaves spiraled down from the oak trees above them. "I'm not hiding," Asim said, picking at the grass beside him. "I just don't like being stared at." They're impressed by you, Deepti said. That's not a bad thing, Asim shrugged. He understood logically that the attention was positive, but emotionally, it felt the same as negative attention. Uncomfortable, overwhelming, draining. Have you heard anything from the university? Deepti asked after a moment. Asim nodded. Dr. Yamada emailed last night. They're testing my solution approach on their full data set. He hesitated, then added, he wants me to come to the university next week to meet with their research team. Deepti's eyes widened. That's amazing. Are you going? The thought of walking into a room full of strangers, brilliant mathematicians no less, made Asim's palms sweat. I don't know. What did your parents say? They think I should go. My dad keeps talking about how this could open doors for my future. Asim pulled his knees up to his chest, but the idea of explaining everything again to more people. Deepti studied his face. After knowing him for only a few weeks, she already understood his social anxiety better than most. What if you didn't have to explain it all by yourself? What if Mr. Patel went with you or your dad? Or, she hesitated, or me? Asim looked up, surprised. You'd come with me? Sure, I wouldn't understand any of the math, but I could be there for moral support. Sometimes it's easier to talk to strangers when you have a friend nearby. The word friend hung in the air between them. It was the first time either had used it, though their daily lunches and text exchanges had clearly moved beyond mere acquaintanceship. I'll think about it, Asim said finally. That evening at dinner, Asim's parents brought up the university visit again. Dr. Yamada called me today, his father said, passing the salad bowl. He was very impressed with your approach to the problem. He thinks it could lead to a significant breakthrough. Asim pushed his food around his plate. He said that in his email too. He also mentioned that they'd like you to present your solution to their entire quantum computing research group next Wednesday. His father tried to keep his tone casual, but excitement crept through. That's a huge honor, Asim. Asim's fork clattered against his plate. Present? To the whole group? His mother noticed his distress. You don't have to decide right away, she said gently. And we'll be there with you, of course. I think I'd need more than that, Asim said quietly. His parents exchanged glances. What do you mean? His father asked. I don't think I can stand up in front of a room full of experts and explain everything, not alone. Asim took a deep breath, but maybe if Deepti came too. And Mr. Patel? His mother smiled. Your friend from school? Of course she can come if it would make you more comfortable, and I'm sure Mr. Patel would be delighted to join us. We'll make it work, his father added. The important thing is that your discovery gets the attention it deserves. Later that night, Asim texted Deepti to ask if she'd really come to the university with him. Her response came back almost immediately. Just tell me when and where. I'll bring moral support snacks. The next day, Asim spoke with Mr. Patel, who was not only willing but excited to accompany him to Greenfield. This is a remarkable opportunity, the teacher said. Your approach to the quantum optimization problem is exactly what they've been searching for. A fresh perspective that bridges different areas of mathematics. With his support team in place, Asim finally emailed Dr. Yamada to accept the invitation. The response came within hours, expressing delight and providing details about the visit. The weekend passed in a haze of anxiety and preparation. Asim spent hours organizing his notes, trying to create a clear explanation of his solution that others could follow. His father helped him prepare a simple presentation with key points listed in order. His mother reminded him to breathe deeply when he felt overwhelmed, a technique that sometimes helped with his anxiety. By Tuesday night, Asim had reviewed his materials so many times he could recite parts from memory. But as he tried to sleep, doubt crept in. What if he'd missed something obvious? What if the university researchers had found a flaw in his approach and were just being kind? What if he froze up completely and couldn't speak? These worries followed him into restless dreams and greeted him when he woke on Wednesday morning. At breakfast, he could barely eat, his stomach a knot of nerves. You've got this, his mother assured him. Just explain it the way you understand it. That's all anyone can ask.